Ethan Crowley had long believed that living alone on his dusty New Mexico ranch was the only way to keep ghosts of the past from clawing at his soul. But fate always has a way of finding the one man who wants nothing except silence. And on a blistering July evening, that silence shattered when he spotted a massive silhouette staggering across the shimmering horizon. A shape so large he first thought it was a wounded horse or a wandering bear, until it collapsed near his fence line with a thunderous thud that rattled the dry earth beneath his boots. Ethan had seen Apache warriors before, quick, fierce, and proud, but he had never in his life seen a woman who towered like this one. Her frame broad and powerful, her skin painted with faded symbols of her people, her braid thick as a rope and long enough to brush the arid ground. She was unconscious, breathing shallowly, dehydrated to the point of near death, and as Ethan knelt beside her, the soft tremble of her lips formed one faint word: water. He hesitated. Tension crackled through his bones. For helping an Apache, especially one this imposing, could easily spark a death sentence. His father had died in a border raid years ago. His mother fled because she feared retaliation. Ethan had every reason to walk away, every reason to leave the giant stranger where she lay. But as the relentless sun beat down on her fevered skin, something deep inside him shifted, not pity, but the old code his father once taught him: a dying soul is still a soul. So he ran back to his ranch, kicked open the cellar door, fetched his last full jug, and returned to her side, lifting her head gently as she gulped greedily, water sliding through cracked lips until the jug was half empty. She opened her eyes then, dark, intense. Ancient and Ethan froze under their weight. She said nothing, simply stared. Confused, suspicious, perhaps even ashamed. But she drank until she could sit on her knees, towering above him even in her weakened state. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Evening winds swept across the land. Dust spiraled like dancing spirits. The tension hung thick between them. Ethan tried to speak, but the woman placed a massive palm on his shoulder. Not in aggression, but acknowledgement, her voice low and powerful as she whispered her name. Tall Willow. She told him she had traveled from far-off mountains to deliver a message to her people, but had been ambushed by rival tribes. She lost her horse, wandered for days, survived on scraps of cactus dew until her strength finally broke. Ethan offered her food, and though she ate sparingly, watching him with the sharp caution of a mountain predator, he felt strangely unafraid. There was something honorable in her presence, something steady. As night fell, she rose with effort, towering over the small porch like a living legend. Ethan pointed toward the empty bunkhouse where she could rest, but she refused to enter. "Sky must see me," she muttered, choosing instead to sit cross-legged in the dirt, face turned toward the moon. Ethan didn't understand, but he respected it. He watched her for hours as stars scattered across the heavens. She barely moved, except to breathe in slow, meditative rhythms. By dawn, Ethan had drifted asleep on the porch chair. But when he opened his eyes to the early light, Tall Willow was gone. The only sign she'd ever been there were the giant footprints pressed into the dust. Ethan rubbed his face, unsure if he'd dreamed the entire encounter. He stepped onto the yard, scanning the horizon, and he froze. His heart slammed against his ribs. His mouth went dry, because there, covering the hills around his ranch like a living tide, stood an army of Apache warriors, hundreds of them, maybe 300, mounted on horses painted with war symbols, their spears glinting under the rising sun, their chests bare and streaked with crimson clay. The ground trembled with the thrum of hooves. Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Had he made a grave mistake? Had giving water to the giant woman violated some sacred boundary? As he took a step back, a massive shadow moved at the front of the army, and Tall Willow emerged, now strong, fierce, fully revived, wearing ceremonial armor and holding a spear etched with ancestral markings. She stared at Ethan with an unreadable expression, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt truly small, truly vulnerable, caught between life and death without knowing which way the wind would blow. Ethan Crowley felt his breath lock inside his chest as 300 Apache. Warriors surrounded his ranch like a living wall of fire and steel, their horses snorting, their painted faces unreadable, their spears glinting under the early sun. And though fear tried to crush him, something deeper, respect, destiny maybe, held him still as tall Willow stepped forward. No longer the exhausted giant he'd rescued, but a towering force of nature, her presence commanding the earth itself as she raised her spear and declared that this man had offered life when she hovered between the world of breathing and the world of spirits. Her thunderous voice rolled across the valley, making even seasoned warriors shift with unease. And though one scarred warrior rode up to challenge her, shouting that a white rancher did not deserve mercy after years of betrayal and bloodshed, tall Willow silenced him with a single fierce glare that could break stone, reminding them all that honor was not a word, but a law older than war, a law that demanded they acknowledge Ethan's act of pure humanity. The warrior bowed, tension melting into reluctant respect, and tall Willow turned to Ethan, placing her enormous hand on his shoulder with a gentleness that shocked him, telling him that had he not given her water, entire clans would have fallen into war, fires would have swept across the mountains, and innocent families would have paid the price. She explained that the peace she carried was fragile, sacred, and he had unknowingly protected it with a simple drink from his last jug. Her voice softened as she told him that from this day on, his ranch would be under the protection of her people, that no outlaw, raider, or wandering soldier would dare disturb his land without facing the wrath of 300 warriors, who now owed him their chief's daughter's life. Ethan's heart thudded painfully at the magnitude of it all. He had expected danger, judgment, maybe even death, but never this. Never a bond stronger than treaties signed on paper. The Apache warriors lifted their spears high in a sweeping motion that thundered through his bones, a gesture of honor most outsiders had never witnessed. And tall Willow mounted her massive black horse, towering even higher, a living legend framed by sunlight, as she called out that their paths would meet again when the earth demanded it. With a powerful cry, she led the army away, 300 warriors moving as one, disappearing toward the horizon in a storm of dust and wind, leaving Ethan staring after them with a heart changed forever. Days later, he noticed shadows watching from distant ridges, not enemies, but guardians. Bandits whispered that the rancher, protected by the giant, Apache woman, was untouchable. Travelers avoided conflict on his land out of reverence, and Ethan realized kindness had woven him into a story greater than any he'd ever imagined. Some nights, when the moon hung low and silver, he felt tall Willow's presence in the whispering wind, a reminder that courage is not always born from battles, but from moments when a man chooses compassion over fear. And that single act can echo through mountains, nations, and legends that outlive every breath he takes.